Hello, my name is Kevin Duska Jr. I'm president of Prime Rogue Inc. We're a Calgary-based geopolitical risk analysis and management company with some involvement in financial markets. And I am here to talk to you today about something that we call information operations. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about how you can use very basic old school intelligence techniques in business and in your everyday life to better reach your goals, minimize the risks that are posed by various threats, and to, I suppose you should say, pursue your own rational self-interest. Now, one thing I want to tell you about what we're talking about today as it pertains to using the Canary trap and to using the Barium meal is we are by no means reinventing the wheel here. That is not the point of this. These techniques have existed forever. They probably existed before they had names. In as much as at a very baseline level, these are core elements of social psychology, right? Of interpersonal relations. And in that respect, the principles that are underlying these are incredibly basic. What is more, I suppose, unique about our application of these tools and how we're going to discuss how they can be applied today is how we're going to integrate them into the intelligence cycle. And I'll be talking a bit about the intelligence cycle using an image of it in a little while. But I kind of want to talk about intelligence, I guess, more broadly first. What intelligence is and what intelligence isn't. Intelligence gathering is not investigation. Investigation is premised on answering a specific, shall we say, question. Whilst in intelligence, we are collecting information and deriving analytical conclusions from it through analysis. The difference being is that when we're collecting intelligence, we're trying to minimize some of the fallacies that are incredibly common in human behavior and human cognition. And we're trying to minimize these by virtue of casting an incredibly wide net and narrowing it as time goes on. I'm trying to load up a good image of the intelligence cycle here. I didn't have one ready when I got started, which is kind of stupid. But regardless, here, this is fine. So planning and direction goes to collection, processing and exploitation, analysis and production, and then dissemination and integration. Dissemination and integration here can also be referred to as operations and planning. The meaning of using operations and planning here is that instead of just integrating it into our existing analytical findings, we're actually going to take action based on the intelligence we've gathered and which we've analyzed. So let's think of the intelligence cycle for today as collection, analysis, operations. Let's streamline it to have 3 phases. Obviously planning, I'm taking it for granted. You do want to plan what you're doing, what you're interested in locating. And what we're interested in locating today is attribution. Either who someone is when they're trying to hide their identity, or who a threat is, either within your organization, within your circle of friends, or within another social setting. And we're going to use 2 different tools to do this, and what I love about these tools, the Canary trap and the Barium meal, is that they can be used either in the collections element, the analysis element, or the operations element of the intelligence cycle. And the reasoning for that is both complex and similar and simple at the same time. Fundamentally, these kinds of information operations, and I need to give a shout out to my homies at Rare Rug Apes, specifically my good friend Peter Potts, aka PP Potts, who is doing the art for the Everyday Intel series. We are gonna, since it's a bird, we're gonna put it on a cup. We're gonna put it on a sticker. So we got this bird who got trapped by the barium. The canary got trapped by the barium meal, and we got the barium meal too. I love Peter's art. I'm gonna pop this down in the video description, and you can check it out if you're interested. We are gonna do a very limited edition print run of the whatever we make out of these. I kind of want to put the canary on a mug and the barium meal on a T-shirt. I don't know. Peter Potts, PP Potts, is an amazing artist. He's the creator of Rare Rug Apes and many other things, and you should check him out. But, alright. So, a lot of what I'm going to say today in this presentation is going to sound incredibly manipulative. And the truth of the matter is that it is. That's kind of the point. These are information operations. We're either trying to plant, well actually we are trying to plant information and then extract it. We're planting either true or false information and then trying to figure out who is giving it back to us. And I'll elaborate on this a bit in a second. What I want to emphasize is what differentiates a practitioner of intelligence from a sociopath is goal orientation and organization. I like to think of intelligence as organized sociopathy. We're not doing anything wrong. We're doing things that are self-interested, and we certainly don't want to be breaking the law. So don't do that. And you know, usual disclaimer, this is not advice. This is simply a demonstration of some basic techniques. So to wit, let's get started. And let's talk about information ops, let's talk about canary traps, and let's talk about barium meals. So these are tools that allow us to detect a leak or detect disloyalty, whether it's in business, in romance, etc., so that we can identify the leak, isolate the leak, and then that's called threat analysis, then engage in threat management, which could involve litigation if it's your partner breaking up with them, if it is a cyberbully, let your imagination run wild. And barium meals and canary traps are probably the two simplest methods that we can use for basic information ops that are oriented towards attribution determination. I like to think of the canary trap, and some people conflate them and say they're the same thing, but I like to think of the canary trap as being usable and applicable when we're dealing with one potential target, and we're going to keep using the word target to refer to the individual or group that we are deploying the canary trap or the barium meal against. While I like to think of the barium meal as something that we are deploying against a larger set of individuals. You might have deployed these in your life before without knowing what they're called. Like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel, but what we are doing is we are attempting to structure our detection of deception in a manner that's going to provide us with analytical rigor, and if necessary down the line, and I'll talk about this, about operational efficiency. And let's talk about ops a bit. These are information ops. The principal goal of an information op is we're not here to assassinate anybody. We're not doing espionage. We're doing intelligence. To wit, if we're doing ops here, it's either to, well, let's be blunt, engage in character assassination, whether overtly or covertly, to engage in other forms of disruptions of an individual or group's life or activities, or third, and the way I like to think about it, and that's kind of how I'm going to get into it with the examples that we're going to discuss, is control the level of stress that your target experiences and change their behavior by imposing levels of stress, whether overtly or covertly, that are at odds with their ability to maintain comfort and well-being in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So different types of people respond differently, and I'll get into that in a bit. So let's get to the canary trap, right? It's the most basic information op you can run to identify deception in your personal life or in your organization. All it takes is basically a little bit of communications discipline and a little bit of creativity. So the crux of the canary trap is that you're going to take a piece of information. It can be true or it can be false. And if you suspect that someone is being disloyal or leaking within your organization, you will tell this piece of information, this very specific piece of information that you have not told to anybody else. You will tell it to them. You might want to feed it to them in a straightforward manner. You might want to try to prime them depending on the characteristics they show. But the internal point of it is to see if the information gets back to you from a third party. So logically, if you've only shared this information with one person and it gets back to you from a third party, what does that mean? It means you have a traitor in your midst. You can modulate the canary trap by asking for confidentiality, but if you're doing that, you're risking making the target suspicious, especially if you don't have a baseline of asking them for confidentiality historically. You can also prime the target. Like, you can be like, yo, please don't share this with anybody. And that your goal in doing that is to actually encourage them to share it somewhere else and get quicker results with the trap. But priming can also arise suspicion, especially if the individual you're targeting it against has consciousness of guilt. In other words, if they're like, oh shit, he's on to me. So when you're deploying the canary trap, like with any other information operation or any other form of psychological manipulation in intelligence work, you kind of need to take the psychology, or what you know of it, of your target into consideration. So I'm going to take an example from my personal life. How can we put this? I was in a certain niche in my personal life, streaming on Twitch. And I was exploring the possibility of a joint business venture with some other people, realized it would not work. It was a bad fit for me. And when I was leaving this potential business venture that I had never committed to, thankfully, I started getting some harassment from someone involved in it. And this person was very aggressive. I wasn't later surprised to find they had a criminal record and, violence in their past, drug use, etc. There was a third party involved in the situation, and they were feigning whether or not they were still going to be involved in the business venture or not. And my analytical question was, is this person being genuine, or is this person acting as an agent of the potential business partner that I just rejected? So like I told you, this was pertaining to some ridiculous Twitch channel stuff. So what I did is, after this person communicated with me in a way that I found to be suspicious, I kind of made myself a psychological profile, in short, of this person. I noticed that they were of significantly below average intelligence. They looked like they were tweaking a lot, and I had seen them smoke pot, and I know these things aren't connected, but I then made the assumption that they likely had a past history of stimulant drug use, which is heavily correlated with trait impulsivity. I noticed that they had high levels of manipulation going beyond the baseline for a female, and that they sought approval. They were very, very approval seeking in nature. They were also incredibly histrionic, melodramatic, and tended to exaggerate reality. Oh, and another trait that's very common in female targets is feigning ignorance, playing dumb, so to speak. Which I'm not saying this is a woman thing, it's just women in some instances are either socialized into it or this results from abuse. So I also inferred there was likely a past of abuse in this person's life, or an ongoing pattern of abuse with regards to this third party the ultimate target that this person was being canary trapped to check on. The person I had rejected in the business endeavor. So, essentially, since this pertained to a Twitch channel, my canary trap for this person was super hyperbolic and way out there. I don't want to give it all away, but essentially, let's say that the business venture we were supposed to engage in was going to be, formal, business-like, what I usually do, and have like a normal name. I think I told them that it was going to be called Degenerate Nerd TV, and that it was going to be a streaming collective where we would be paying streamers based on this collective pool. It was very absurd and very detailed. And the reason for that is I was trying to prime the living hell out of this woman, knowing the low level of self-control and incredibly low level of intelligence that she had. My main goal was basically for her to screenshot it and send it to the guy, because I think I did this via a DM. Lo and behold, about 3 days later, I'm interacting with someone I'm actually in business with at the time, and they're like, yeah, this person is like worried that you're going to be doing this. And I'm like, yeah, you heard this from X person. And this person's like, I don't really want to get into that. I'm like, well, see, I laid a canary trap for this person to see if they were going to tell that person, which they clearly did, which you just clearly indicated to me. I have no plans of doing this. This was an attempt to determine if this person could be trusted with sensitive information. Clearly they cannot be. It got back to the original target, who then spread it to you, who is then spreading it back to me. So y'all are sharing screenshots of ostensibly private business DMs. None of you can be trusted. Case closed. I didn't just nail one target, I nailed 3 of them. Right? So it was incredibly effective. The target distributed the information just as I had hoped. It was obvious, like, she didn't know what these words meant. She's really, like, scraping the bottom of the IQ bowl here. Like, super low intelligence, highly impulsive. She clearly been sent on a fishing mission by this individual, and the canary trap worked like a charm. So basically, having identified the leak, well, I was good to go. I knew that this person could be trusted, and this kind of confirmed my broader view of this other business venture that failed absolutely miserably, as something that should be avoided at all costs, that their partners should be avoided at all costs, etc. So, to sum up what the canary trap was, essentially, one potential leak, one story, and you give them that story, and you just wait and see if it comes back to you. I was talking about deception and priming. Yes, everything was made up in this case. I had no plans of doing any of these things. I deceived and I primed because the target, the person who received the trap, was an absolute idiot. Low IQ, low intelligence, highly impulsive, likely drug use, people pleaser, which is a characteristic you often see in these types of people. Benefits, from what I had been informed. Just basically, I primed this situation perfectly for that kind of target. And that's what you want to do. And you don't always have a detailed psychological evaluation of your target, but you do want to focus on some of the more evident traits, which I'll talk a bit about later. Something like that. But let's differentiate between the canary trap and the barium meal. Canary trap is focused on finding a leak by targeting a single target. The barium meal, in contrast, and let's look at P.P. Potts's depiction of a barium meal, because the barium meal is a test in medicine where you swallow some kind of radioactive isotope, and it then shows up on a radiographical examination, right? So the point of the barium meal is that we're actually going to be targeting, just as it does different elements of an organ, a group of people, right? So I'm in this situation where I'm dealing with a business rival slash, I wouldn't really consider them a threat. They were way below my league, but they were just kind of a pain in the butt. And I wanted to see if basically some joint acquaintances could be trusted, or whether they were being manipulated by this other party into doing things that were against my self-interest as well as against their own self-interest. So I started by making a list of the potential leakers, and then I did a basic psychological profile of the individual in question. I found basically a very high likelihood of trait psychopathy, average to above average intelligence with low levels of formal schooling, known history of violence, known history of drug use. The cultural business environment in which this was taking place was one with poorly enforced norms. It was an immature sector. It was crypto. It was a very immature sector of the economy, and still is, mind you. We're going to have a whole series on how to deal with people in crypto. Just don't trust them. Not that I ever did, but some people make the foolish mistake of trusting them. But essentially, I took all of these elements to account, then looked at kind of a Venn diagram of people who were, shall we say, mutual acquaintances, or mutual, I wouldn't say friends, mutual acquaintances is probably the better word. And what I did is what I wanted to do, I should say, is I wanted to see which of these individuals were potential threats or leaks. So rather than wearing a canary trap, you're just going to invent one piece of fake information. What you're doing when you're running a barium meal is you're actually taking a variant of a piece of information, right? Here, let me open up a Word doc. This might give you a better example of what I'm talking about here. So you're going to give a different version of a same story, or another type of variation on a theme tied to a given message to a group of people. So let's say you have your threat matrix, that is the people you've identified as potential leakers, right? And you can spread this net as wisely as you want. So let's create John, Jane, Jimmy, Jules, Joseph, Jonathan, Julia, and June. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's focus on a core story. Let's say we're in the fruit business, right? We're in the fruit business. We're a fruit wholesaler. I'm selling him a pallet, and let's just copy this all down the line, Control C, Control V. You're going to see how basic this is. This is not what I did, but it's a very similar variation on it, and I'll explain sort of what I did in a bit. I'm selling him a pallet of melons, of blueberries, of bananas, of oranges, of apples, of pomegranates, of strawberries, and we could even throw a really weird one in there, like of beefsteak tomatoes, if you want to get really specific, or if you had a longer list of people. So we're taking all these different barium meals, basically, and we're giving them to all these different people. As soon as one comes back to us, we know that the version that got back to us associated with only one person, because you've maintained a very significant communications discipline throughout the entire process, is a leak. So in this particular case that I was dealing with this individual with like high levels of traits, psychopathy and impulse control, anger management was one of the big ones. And the reason I'm giving you these traits is I'm going to tell you how this integrates with operations in a bit. is I I actually had a real concern about information security tied to a third party's servers. So I made this Venn diagram of people, and without recreating the exact same scenario, I gave a different variation on the theme to different people. So one person, I might have said, I'm afraid this person is going to be stealing our information off the server. To one, I would have been like selling information from the server. To one, I would have been like using this information from the server for hacking, for tracking our addresses, for stealing our emails. I gave all these different variants of a story. I think I had given them to like 8 people, and it turns out 4 of them were leaking. Over the course of 2 weeks, I did have 4 versions of the story come back to me. And what was crazy about this is you have your target, then you have your more distal main target, which is the psychopath in this case. Your target is the mutual acquaintance, right? I actually had this come back to me from a third party. So this is when a barium meal or a canary trap becomes an operation. In this case, inadvertently. So what this showed, and let's say I told this person that I was afraid that the individual in question was stealing our information or selling our information, either one. It came back to me from a third party. So this discredits pretty much everyone involved. In my eyes, it discredits the individual, the target, who leaked it to the distal target. In the eyes of the target, it denigrates the distal target and the third party who leaked it, because they're like, well, shit, I thought I could trust you. No, you clearly can't. So, given that you have an original relationship, in this case business, with the first person, and in this case, I mean, I could have potentially litigated the matter had I cared or needed the money, because it involved the violation of terms of service and privacy policies. You're hopefully, if you're doing this right, and if the person's behaving as you've profiled them, or if they're not too stupid to get it, which in crypto, believe me, often they are. It's full of morons, but I'll get into that another time. You want to control the level of stress you're causing them. So when I was talking about this trait, this guy in this case, this target, this distal target, with high trait psychopathy and poor impulse control, my approach to using a barium meal as an op would be one in which my goal is essentially to make this person lose it. So one fell swoop, just find some information, say something that'll just make them discredit themselves because of the short-term stress that you're imposing on them by operationalizing the canary trap or barium meal. In contrast, I've had experiences in dealing with people who I know to be prone to anxiety or prone to second-guessing themselves, low self-confidence. Particularly women tend to be vulnerable to this, although I don't want to generalize. What you want to do in those cases is you want to ramp the pressure up and down until you gain compliance. These people will typically show a little bit more restraint than a psychopath with high levels of narcissism and low levels of self-discipline. But at the same time, they also won't be able to hold it in the medium to long term. Eventually, you're going to make them break. And if you make them break, they're either going to leave the operational environment in which you're operating, or they're going to stop being a problem either way. So, essentially, your goal when you're turning this into an op, and I'll discuss this a bit more in a bit, is to cause stress to your target. And that might sound unethical, but it's not. Because you're just reflecting you or your business's rational self-interest in a manner that's premised on organized and empirically validated techniques, because you're responding to stress that's being caused to you. So any notion that this is unethical is absolutely foolish. But I want to talk about the most recent example of this that I've experienced, and it kind of gave me some new insight into the power of barium meals and the power, well, of barium meals, because we're dealing with a group, is that you can identify threats within a group, differentiate the threats, attribute the threats, manage the threats, and disrupt the threats, by using the same technique I just told you. The only difference is that instead of targeting these individuals as, you know, mutual connections in a more atomized or atomistic fashion, you're going to be targeting them on the basis of group membership. And social identity theory suggests that we seek to join groups to bolster our self-esteem by denigrating people who are not in the group. So when the group is insulted or threatened, the human tendency is to go to the defensive of the group. Because even if you're attacking another member of the group, it feels like an attack on yourself because you're part of the group, even if you're not involved. In this case, we were dealing with a highly tribalistic group, prone to histrionics, charismatic leader, probably above average level of emotional intelligence / manipulation potential, below average level of book smarts, low level of formal education. To say the least, person has a bit of a chip on their shoulder. Group tribalistic. Group makeup is average to above, to slightly below average intelligence for the most part. High level of impulsivity found throughout the group, especially within leadership. The hierarchy is informal but clearly defined if you were to kind of do an ethnography of it. And it kind of like sticks to hood rules, right? Like kind of like lower income street culture, or at least it says it does. It doesn't, and I knew that. And, I didn't have an issue with the group per se, but I disconnected myself from its activities because I deemed these activities to be at odds with my self-interest and to be potential security threats. So what was weird about the situation is I didn't care. I was just like, okay, well, hey, it's like leaving a social club or starting to go to a different bar, right? But I started getting weird messages the next day, like messages to the extent of, oh, well, it's sad to see you go, but we'll always be friends. And one of the unique traits of the member of the hierarchy of this group, again, pretty manipulative, decent intelligence, chip on the shoulder, is they tend to communicate via video messages. I don't know if it's because they can't type, they're too busy to type, they type slowly. I do this too sometimes because I'm lazy. Could just be laziness. But that meant that I had a significant baseline of communications from this person. And I could think back and look back at this baseline and be like, this is not how this person usually acts. So even though I didn't care about this, when I got these messages, I'm like, I saw a few red flags in these videos, in as much as the communication was inauthentic, it was contextually inappropriate, there was a lot of gaze aversion, unusual posture, a lot of downward right shifting of the eyes, which would normally indicate emotional accessing. And I was just like, something is not right. So I basically, and I won't get into the details because this was a pretty recent operational thing, I sent a barium meal with different variations to several members of the group, but I was specifically targeting one individual, again, a female. Females tend to be more vulnerable to these influence operations. It's information operations. It's just a thing. If I was to summarize this person, I don't know them very well. I'd say middle-aged, highly manipulative, low self-esteem, but high narcissism, medium intelligence, probably pretty decent formal schooling, prone to feigned feigned ignorance is a big one with this person. And yeah, I ran a barium meal on this person with a very specific version, and on others I got the one from the main target back within hours. And I basically realized that even though there was nothing going on, this group thought that I had somehow become a threat, which allowed me to prepare myself and govern myself accordingly, because 75% of the people I sent the barium meal to, in one way or another, got back to me either directly or indirectly. So when you're using the barium meal, its primary value for a group actually is to allow you to engage in triage or differentiation of attribution, in as much as you can tell which members of the group are not loyal to you, we're just going to betray you. You can also tell which members of the group are potential sources that you can flip to become resources if you have an ongoing dispute or rivalry or business arrangement with said group. So this allows you to simultaneously collect info but also run an op where you're cultivating potential future sources, all the way identifying high-risk individuals within the group. So, like, we're going to discuss this in a future segment, but when we're talking from an offensive op posture, you can use the result of either a canary trap or a barium meal for deterrence or attack. So this can either be direct or a false flag. You could use a false flag to sow discord within a group through targeted manipulation of low intelligence and approval-seeking members. You could even reach people and touch them in real life, as long as you're doing it in a way that's legal. So the beauty of the barium meal in the context of a group is that it basically creates additional suspicion when it's exposed within the group. So this is like kind of the next level 3D, 4D chess thing. But if you run a barium meal in a group and you want to mess with the group, you want to sow discord within the group, make it known, or make sure it gets back to the group, that you ran this barium meal and that some group members passed and some of them failed. Because then you're going to create suspicion within the group. It's beautiful. In some cases, they're just going to turn on each other. In some cases, some will bail. Either way, it's a way of kind of... I mean, in a way, it's just... You could use it to mess around, or you could use it to attempt to destroy the group if you viewed it as being a threat. You could also use it as a deterrent, so to attempt to show to the group in question that, hey, maybe you might not want to mess around with me in the future because I have the potential or capability to do this. And, you know, from a very reptilian perspective, people don't like to admit that they were tricked, right? So in the group hierarchy, especially when you have manipulation ongoing within the group, you're very likely to see people who might have lied basically lie again to the group leader, even as to whether or not they were contacted. So when you combine these types of information ops, barium meals and canary traps, with other types of operations, you can sow significant discord in these groups. And now let's finish up with a brief discussion of some of the traits that I find to be relevant to designing the canary trap or barium meal that you're going to put into the field. Some of those that I found to be most useful in my experience, both formal and informal, are levels of intelligence, levels of schooling, traits, and you can read up upon on these based on standardized scale, notably psychopathy, sociopathy, empathy, narcissism, perceived values, so we're talking about tribalism, self-esteem, violence, criminality. Really, the greatest one of them all, though, in terms of exploitation and manipulation, is past substance abuse, I should say, or current substance abuse. When you're dealing with these types of individuals, they tend to be incredibly volatile, Um, they might turn on everybody if you play them well enough. They have very high levels of impulsivity, very high tolerances for risk. So, in dealing with these people, and if you use the social scientific and psychological literature the right way, if you really want to find the Achilles heel of a group that you're targeting, and you know that someone has a past or current substance abuse issue in it, that is going to be your target. This is, I mean, like I said, this is organized sociopathy. This is Darwinism. You're going at the weakest link. And let's face it, addiction is a form of weakness. It may be a biological disease, but it is also weakness, especially in the group setting. It is the weakest link. It is the person most likely to betray you. It is the person who will do whatever, and I really mean whatever, to get that next crack rock if they run out of money. So, I mean, you want to target people with low self-esteem, approval-seeking, high impulsivity, and like I'm saying, people with active or past substance abuse problems, they're kind of the bee's knees in that regards. What else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'll make sure to get to them. Otherwise, a like and a subscribe or follow, whatever it's called here on YouTube, is always immensely appreciated. Prime Rogue Inc. brings you regular up-to-date content regarding using intelligence ops in your own life, operations, and analyses of ongoing geopolitical situations and market analysis from a geopolitical perspective. So smash whatever those buttons are, and govern yourself and your portfolio accordingly. Have a good one.